Hello, I'm Mina Fazel, and I'm going to share some tools that I created to help teachers manage children at school. This was specifically developed for refugee children, but hopefully it's useful for any of you working in schools with young people you might be worried with. So I'm going to share my slides now. So this is what I call a simple school mental health toolbox. The virtual school in Wiltshire have asked me to record this for you, but it's a study I did. It's funded by the NIHR a few years ago. So what I'll do is just go a quick overview on refugee mental health issues and how they might be affecting children, and then to go through this toolbox, which is just a few tools, thinking a little bit about managing trauma, and then practical ways to work with children experiencing behavioural and emotional behavioural difficulties. So this is a big problem, displacement, and many of you will be aware of the statistics. So this is just to kind of show you in the graphic form how this is a problem that just is not going away. I started working in this field probably around 2001, and I honestly didn't think it would be a big problem for long, and actually it's just gone up and up and up, the numbers. And it's 2021 now, and there are probably around 79 million people currently displaced, of which half are under the age of 18. And kind of the decade of 2010 to 2019 had kind of 100 million people forcibly displaced, but only a very small number of asylum applications received, 16 million, which shows that the majority of those displaced are either moving within their country of origin, they're called internally displaced, or to neighbouring countries. So a very, very small number do end up in high income nations. And very concerning numbers of unaccompanied minors are in that group. And just thinking about some of the more modern difficulties, COVID kind of complicates everything around the refugee presentation. So it can make past traumatic experiences even more acute in that feeling of isolation, that feeling of abandonment. Seems to be that there's been a 40% increase in the need for humanitarian aid across the world in 2020, which was the peak of the beginning of the COVID crisis. Dangerous journeys, even more dangerous as borders closed to everybody, not just to those seeking humanitarian protection. There's real concerns around detention centres, and then the profound isolation in resettlement and the economic fallout, with a study in Norway showing that 77% of adults had lost their jobs. And if we're thinking about refugee children, this is the context in which they're being raised if they are with their families. So thinking about what happens to refugee children, well, they suffer all the problems that socially marginalised populations suffer from, and also forced migration, experiences of persecution, emotional, physical trauma, and with the unaccompanied minors, the loss of a primary caregiver. They're kind of exposed to insecurity at important age stage in development, which can either enhance or threaten their well-being. And they have diverse needs for support, not just mental health support, housing support, financial support. But thinking about their mental health needs, the common presentations are anxiety and depression, with disturbed sleep presenting, or headaches and abdominal pain. Comorbidities, it's very, very common to have the two together, or those with other difficulties. The whole range of trauma reactions, grief reactions, and the most extreme response within that is post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. And then a lot of protection concerns around safeguarding and threats of harm to self and others. But, don't forget, the majority have very good outcomes. So, for example, in the States, Sudanese adolescents did better if they felt safe and supported in their post-migration environment, and Australian school children, refugee school children, self-reported mental health scores higher than the local population. So we have to keep in mind this is a highly resilient population, and our task is to try and assist them as much as possible to do that. So thinking about the mental health influences for young refugees, well, there are things that have happened pre-migration, their experiences peri-migration and their journeys, and then their experiences post-migration, the post-migration environment. And that's what I'm really interested in, and how to make that context much more welcoming and enabling the young refugee to thrive. And it's important to think of that individual in the context of their family, community, and school, and the wider society. And they kind of have these multiple exposures to potentially traumatic events, either in their countries of origin or in the journeys or when they arrive, like all seem to be fraught with major complexities. And then you come into this dark, cloudy post-migration environment, which we need to try and brighten. And thinking about, the actual prevalence, so the rates kind of show around 35% of refugee children in post-migration environments have PTSD, about 40% have depression. So obviously, so much depends on, which part of the world they might have come from, and what they might have exposed to, which country of resettlement they end up in. So these are, complicated kind of generalizations, but if you put all the literature together, that's what you find. And that just shows that so kind of PTSD falling in that range. So what do we know about resilience? So it's supported by having finances, being proficient in the host language, having strong social networks, having parents who are engaged, not only in their parenting with the child, but with the school and the wider community, that their family is cohesive, that they're able to maintain some cultural supports, so valuing their original culture of origin, getting educational support, and having faith in religious involvement. So this is a study that looked at kind of all the factors that contribute to resilience. So I now want to talk to you about the different tools that we trialled in this toolbox. So the aim of this was to try and kind of develop something that you could learn quite quickly, which is why I'm going to try and do it in as quick a video as possible right now. And that, you shouldn't go and expect to use every single one of them with a young person. I think it's just having kind of tools up your sleeve that might be useful to use in the school context. And the reason why I think this is so important is because as a child psychiatrist, I often think that the most powerful and potent interventions, mental health interventions that refugee children can be exposed to are conducted in schools by staff in schools, and I have absolutely no access to that as a psychiatrist. So it's really just understanding for those of you working in schools how much you can potentially do that the rest of us can't, because you're able to help individuals interact with their peers, engage with wider learning, feel a sense of self-esteem, and give ideas as to how they might be able to build their confidence. And at your fingertips, you have all the kind of structured and unstructured opportunities that the school offers. So the aim of this toolbox is to really think around what you can do at different times, depending on the problem that emerges, and maybe one of these is worth practicing and can help. So I'm going to talk about MAPS, icebreakers, trauma, what I've called the treasure box, sleep hygiene, behavioural activation, relaxation techniques. A lot of this is well-known stuff. This is not stuff I've created. These are commonly used techniques and tools across the psychological therapies. So the first is MAPS. So it might be useful for a young person who might feel particularly isolated, maybe particularly persecuted, to build a map of their current system of support. So if you've got a young fellow, maybe Ellie, there, it would be about drawing a piece of paper, putting Ellie in the middle of it, and then just saying, okay, Ellie, tell me about where you're living, who is there? And you would draw a map of, you'd write the name, if they're with their family, you'd say my mother, my brother, sister, you draw that. And then you say, okay, is there anyone else in your home or who lives around you that you perceive as helpful or nice, or someone you can draw support from? And then you'd go to school and say, well, is there anyone at school? So can you tell me if there are any children you talk to at school, are friends with, are there any members of staff, either teachers or other members of staff? Is there anyone in your community? Is there anything else you do? So slowly you can kind of populate this sheet of paper with individuals, and a young person who might feel incredibly isolated and alone might be able to then look at that map and think, actually, well, there are these kind of different pockets of individuals who exist with me. But if the map is empty, then we really can help think together about how to fill it, how to populate it, whether there are extracurricular activities they can get involved in, whether there are individuals in the school you can, pair them up with in a educational activity, let's say a project, and you just put them with 3 people, and you're able to ensure that you're putting that individual with others who might be a bit more friendly, a bit more welcoming, a bit more open to ideas. It doesn't need to be a formal, you're their mentor, you need to be their friend. It can just be enabling these young people to build natural friendships in the school environment. So that leads to icebreakers, and that's really just about the importance when a refugee child enters the school in particular, to try and think about the different ways to help that child thrive and succeed. And that could be around focusing on what the whole school community needs to understand about arriving at non-traditional points of entry, or what it must feel like to come at different times, or to fill the curriculum with opportunities to celebrate diversity and diverse cultures. But really what I find is that in the school environment, speaking to other teachers or members of staff in your own school or across other schools, how have they been able to help kids? What ideas have they had? And just learning to share, because actually you're all experts in this. You all do it naturally all the time. It's just about getting a few more ideas up your sleeve to do it. So this is a really simple tool from my perspective, because it's about actually drawing on everything you know and everything you think and ideas you've had from others about how to try and help. And I'll put the student account here that I think is important, because it highlights why it's important to help young people settle at school. So this is a young fella who said, I don't know, find a way to try and make them feel welcome, because there's not so many people that makes them feel like they're welcome. Jamie was our main source in the way that he was the first person that made us feel welcome in school. He's a student, but he was the best one ever. If we didn't have Jamie, we wouldn't be here. Nobody would know us. People liked Jamie, and he was a pole that makes the school stand up. So I was like, well, what did this Jamie do? Who was he? And they said, well, he helped me. He didn't care. He thought about what? He lost friends over helping us, because they were thinking, oh, you spend more time with them than us. He would be with us whenever we needed the help. He was there. We even needed money. We would ask Jamie. I'd say, Jamie, we need money to go there. Okay, here you go. He would give it. All right. Obviously, we borrowed the money, but he would do it. So this is a little snippet of an account from a refugee child talking about the impact of just making a friend at school, how that person helped them, how that person made them feel validated and important. And it's really kind of finding ways to really assist with this. So in a study I did with refugee children, asking them kind of, about their resettlement experience, out of a few of the stories, they came about this kind of what I call the moment of change, like where the young children say that everything kind of changed. For one kid, it was like after 3 years, he was able to access the mental health support that had been offered to him over the years. For others, they just felt accepted, and all of these were around the local kids at the school, making them feel accepted, making them feel that was either through assemblies or music clubs or sport clubs, or just kind of having the odd individual who would actually make them feel like they were a friend. So it wasn't kind of getting a refugee status, their parents getting a job. These accounts are all about just making friends with the host population. And that's why I just kind of really started this journey for me about, oh my gosh, how can we facilitate that? And it's really brought me into the school context, because actually there's no better place to do it for many kids than within the school. So I'll talk a little bit about trauma now. So trauma has a range of psychological responses to trauma. There are acute and longer term implications. It's associated with anxiety disorders, depression, educational failure, self-harm. And PTSD is the most extreme response to trauma, and its reaction to a life-threatening disorder encompasses an increasing range of events and human reactions across different cultures, and there are core symptoms of PTSD. Re-experiencing the original trauma, having this kind of sense of hyper-arousal, so you're always on the lookout for it, but then this kind of emotional blunting that everything else you don't quite react to. And that leads to individuals to often kind of completely avoid any potential reminder of the trauma. So I think for those that have experienced extremely traumatic events, be they refugee children or other children in the community, the goal from a school staff perspective, I do think needs to be to refer to the right services. So you need to know your local providers, you need to build some sort of relationship with them. But actually, because avoidance is such a core component of PTSD, that individual child is going to do everything they can to avoid any potential reminder of that event. And unfortunately, the majority of interventions to successfully treat PTSD will involve some exposure element. And so not only are they going to avoid any reminder of the event, but they're also going to probably avoid any therapeutic intervention because they know that they're likely to have to do some sort of exposure or reliving or talking about their memory that they're doing everything in their power to suppress. So this is where a relationship with that young person is really key. Because through that relationship, you're able to give that young person some information, you're able to support them. And what we've found is with the ability to accompany young children in that making those first steps towards treatment, it's going to be really difficult to go to a strange place, to meet a stranger and to tell them about the worst thing that's ever happened to you or series of events that have happened to you, especially when you're trying to avoid any memory of that. So I think that for a lot of young people, we see that when they've built a relationship with someone at school and that person has been able to facilitate and accompany them to get care, that has been incredibly beneficial. And you really wonder, like, if that hadn't have happened, when next might they potentially find an adult that they might be able to trust sufficiently to enable them to be supported to access care. And the advantage of school is there's a whole range of staff, so hopefully across the board one of them might be just the right person. So not to treat the young person, not to give the intervention, just to facilitate, helping them understand that it's so difficult. People always worry about talking about their traumatic events. They really think it's better just to not do it. But if it starts to impact on your life, how important it is to really try and address it, and that actually the role you could potentially play in accompanying a young person to getting care is unique sometimes. So it's good to think about what your worries about broaching a subject with a young person might be. You might need to talk about it a bit in order to understand what they're going through. A lot of people are worried they're going to open a Pandora's box. A lot of people are worried they're going to make it worse. So these are common concerns. But I would say, in all honesty, the danger of not taking that opportunity to help a young person access care is that they might never have that opportunity again. They might not be able to have it in a manner that is acceptable to them, as it might be through the facilitation that we work with. So these are just some examples of questions you might be able to ask a young person who think might be suffering from some previous trauma that is affecting the way that they're behaving with their peers or their attitudes to school and learning. So just thinking about, has anything very difficult happened in the past that's still troubling today? Do you get upsetting thoughts or pictures? But that's reminding you that reliving is one of the core symptoms of PTSD. So that come into your mind. Is there anything you avoid because it brings back bad memories? Do you have sleep nightmares or daydreams where difficult things have happened? You're reminded of them. And do you have worries in the daytime before you sleep around certain themes? So this isn't asking you to become their therapist. It's just finding a way to open the door to see whether there's anything going on that you might be able to then help them with. And what if they say nothing comes up, even though you're highly suspicious or concerned for them? Well, don't overprobe. It's not uncommon for them to not disclose if they don't want to, and they should feel safe when they feel they want to disclose. So no probably doesn't mean no for some of these young people. It might be, I don't tell you just yet, I'm not sure I trust you. Who are you going to go and tell if I tell you? So always keep an open mind whatever you answer. And young people might do what's called test disclosures to see whether you pass the test. Can you cope? Will you get upset? Will you cry? Will you tell someone else? And general good advice for young people is to keep routines, to keep normal boundaries, to be understanding but not overindulgent, over-aggression, anxiety, and be clear it's okay to talk about it, check in regularly, but don't force discussion. So thinking about traumatic memories, we can think about the memory itself as being often just poorly encoded in the brain. So we look upon it as this kind of fragmented memory. And if they try to repair it alone, it can end up like this. But there's this beautiful tradition in Japanese pottery. So I bought this beautiful box pot. And I was like very confused when I went because it had this kind of golden thing. And a lot of people had gone to have a look at this. So it's a little snail. It's also to demonstrate that it can be slow work, and that's fine, but it's snail and it's got a gold head and it's got these gold things here. And this is the Japanese art of fixing broken pots with gold. So there's a kind of belief that when something is broken, it can be kind of aggrandized like this or made more beautiful. That through the process of repairing it, it ends up being a more beautiful piece than if it had broken in the first place. And so I want you to keep that in mind. Okay, I'm going to move to my next one now, which is what we call the treasure box. This is something we created just to try and think about, I suppose, the isolation that refugee children go through, and also the danger that many of them might be removed at short notice. And is there anything we can do to ensure that they have something to fall back on if that happens? And so we thought, why don't you, as a child, draw a treasure box? So I had wanted to find a big pirate's chest as my treasure box, but then I found this one on my Google search. So the treasure box can look whatever the young person wants it to look like. So they can search for images, or they can draw their own, or just get an old shoebox if they want. But I think the point of this box is to really think about the issue of how do I look after myself. So helping a young person think about all the different ways they can look after themselves when things are difficult. So if you've got a young person with difficulties about anger, or a young person with difficulties with anxiety or isolation or self-harm, or a young refugee who's feeling very alone, for example, you can say, look, at these moments, what could you put in your treasure box so that, when you're in that moment, you can open up the box and something in there will help you. Because at those worst moments for the individuals, no matter what they're going through, they're probably least likely to be able to think of a way to help themselves. So it's good to have a little stock of what's there. And so they can put kind of a favourite book in there, or a picture, or a name of a friend to text, and what they're going to write in that text to the friend. They could put, go play football on it, or go for a walk, or a favourite snack in there, or colouring pens and paper, a favourite magazine. There are a million different things that provide solace to individuals. And what would help one young person is not going to necessarily help another. So they need to create this for themselves. And it can be over time. lots of young people put music in there, and the only thing I would say is that make sure the music is uplifting rather than depressing music. So, it can just be something you can just do one-off with a young person, or just do over time. Let's think, okay, we've put 2 things into this treasure box, but it would be nice to have 5 or 6 things in there in case, you don't want to call your friend that night, but, we need to think about things. And so that can be a task that a young person can think about, and hopefully in that process they learn that they have things within them that they can turn on. They don't need external support. You never want a kid to feel like they're not going to cope or manage if they don't have access to a counsellor or a psychiatrist, for God's sake, or anything like that. You really want to enable that young person to really believe that they have what they need within themselves. So I'm going to talk about sleep hygiene. It's really such a commonly disrupted phenomenon across the range of mental health problems. So sleep, just getting good sleep really is what sleep hygiene means. It's so important. So what do we know about sleep? Well, there are 3 components in sleep hygiene. One is the environment you're sleeping in. So if a young person's functioning is being affected by their poor sleep, then it's important to ask them about the environment. So in order to get restful sleep, a lot of kids will need a dark room, a quiet room, one in which the temperature's right. So you need to be able to ask them what the environment's like. Now, it might be that they have no control of the environment, but if they do have some control of the environment, to help them think about how they can exercise it. So make sure the bed is comfortable, again, if that's possible, but also the importance of associating bed as a place of rest. So to sleep when sleepy, to get out of bed if not asleep after about 20 minutes, try and do something for 10 minutes or so, preferably boring, not as stimulating. Game on your phone, maybe listen to some calm music if you have to have your phone with you. Obviously, not having your phone is better, but in a way, most young people might ignore that advice. And so you need to work with what they're doing and guide what they do away from the stimulating things. So the second area is about the sleep-wake cycle or pattern. So it's really important if a young person's struggling with their sleep to understand the importance of maintaining their circadian rhythm. So to keep regular hours, especially on the weekends, so kind of not sleeping in the week and then doing these kind of 14-hour stints on the weekends might be fine if you don't have difficulties with your sleep. But if you're having difficulty with your sleep, that might just be, keeping your body and maintaining that kind of shifted sleep pattern away from more normal hours into one where you will sleep late in the night and then wake up much later in the day. So you need to maintain regular hours, get up at 8 every day. You need to take more exercise, but not immediately prior to bedtime. Some guidance is between 2 and 6 hours, depending on what that young person's constitution is like. Rituals are often good to try and help young people relax, be that, it might be reading a certain type of book, or having a bath, or having some sort of, hot chocolate or relaxing drink. Avoiding daytime naps is really, really key. So it's so prevalent having a daytime nap. And, a lot of young people after a nap will find it difficult to sleep that evening because their sleep cycle's been so disrupted and they've had such a rejuvenating sleep often. So really fighting the daytime nap is really key for young people who are struggling with their evening sleep. And then for some, a snack might help. And then the last area is to avoid stimulants, which is sort of obvious, but it's thinking about what is a stimulant. So worrying in bed is really problematic. So if there can be ways to distract or compartmentalize that, so putting a worry list, putting away, maybe that will help. So limiting screen time, no computers, TV work. So if you've really got a problem with your sleep, like at least 2 hours before you want to fall asleep, you need to stop all screens. But that just might not be something that young people will accept. So I sort of feel we have to be a bit practical as well and just go with what they're telling us and help tailor what they're doing. Take the brightness off your screen. Don't play these games. Do this, etc. Having less caffeine and being aware that caffeine is present in teas. Alcohol can have rapid sedative effects, but then you often wake up when blood levels fall, and so that can impact on sleep. Nicotine is a stimulant, and just be careful not to overindulge in things that upset your tummy. Okay. I think it's just 2 more tools now. So this is a really important one, and this is commonly used in CBT and a lot of psychological interventions. We call it behavioural change, or behavioural activation. So this is what is commonly referred to as the hot cross bun. So it's a formulation about how our thoughts, what we think, how we feel and act, and our physical symptoms all interact. So, you know, if you're feeling really, really low, like I feel low, I feel sad, you might think, oh, I am worthless, I'm useless. You might have physical symptoms make you feel really tired. And then all of those thoughts and feelings and symptoms might just lead you to isolate yourself in your room. Not see anyone because, well, your friends don't want to see you when you're thinking. When you think like this, the last thing you think is all your friends want to see you. So you kind of can end acting in a way that perpetuates that cycle and reinforces those beliefs. And so the point of this is that, you know, sometimes you can sit and try and talk about thoughts and change those, or feelings and change those, but actually there's very good evidence to show that if you just change the action associated with these thoughts and feelings, that actually you get a knock-on effect that improves the whole system. So that's where the term behavioural activation comes in. So that changing what you do, so instead of isolating yourself, forcing yourself to maybe contact a friend, and then seeing how actually that might then lift your thoughts and your feelings and how you feel about yourself. So one way, so that's what I've been saying, behavioural change is a good predictor also of treatment success. And by behavioural change, we mean planning to do something more enjoyable or something where you feel that you've accomplished something. So one way to do this is just stick to the here and now. Just, you know, stick to today. If you're talking to a young person, say, what are you going to do this afternoon that's different? And so use this as a way just to encourage a change in a sense of pleasure or achievement, thinking about helping them see that certain activities might improve their mood, that what they're doing now is different to how they were before they were depressed. And as I said, encourage change in time allocated pleasure activities, and also just encourage a range of activities, a mixture of obligations with social activities, relaxation, physical activities. So it's not all about having fun. That helps, but it's more just about action in a meaningful way, either by, you know, helping with chores or getting your homework done, might lead to quite profound changes elsewhere. So relaxation techniques, I think, are the last ones I'm going to talk you through. Just kind of having a load of these up your sleeves. There are hundreds of different ones that you can look up online, and I would encourage you to, because what works for some people really doesn't work for others. And so there are 3 that might be quite useful, but just to remember that when a young person is able to identify one that works, that actually it helps most when you're able to practice it. So if you can practice it when you don't need it, it's easier to draw upon it when you do need it. So the 3 I'm going to go through are deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, and the peaceful sleep. So deep breathing is literally what it sounds like. So when people are anxious, they tend to take quick, shallow breaths, only inhaling into the upper chest. So what you should do is get a young person to put their hand on their stomach and one on their chest. And then you'd get them to breathe in to a count of 3, hold it, and breathe out to count of 3. But as they're breathing in, they need to move the hand that's sitting on their stomach. And as they breathe out, the hand on their stomach goes in again. So this is about not doing this upper chest thing, but lower chest thing. We're just going to do that. And just take a few breaths like that immediately. A young person might feel calmer. Progressive muscle relaxation is this technique where it's totally different to deep breathing. You can deep breathe while you do it. It's where you tense and relax different muscle groups. And you tense the muscles just enough to notice what it feels like, and then you relax them. So you need to, for example, sit comfortably, both feet on the floor, lie in bed, focus on breathing, and then work through each muscle group. So you tense the muscle, count to 5 and then release it. Pause for a few seconds. And there are many different ways to do this. There are lots of guided tools online available to talk people through this. And the young person's got to find the right type of voice to the right type of music that suits them, but I bet you they'll be able to. So you tense each muscle group twice, and after having tense, try not to move it again. So this is just an example of what they do, like with your arms and hands. Clench your fists, push your arms straight down in front of you. So do that, hold at 5 and let it go. So why don't you just try that? And then you can go through a whole range of muscles. I'll leave you to read there. And the last one is a peaceful scene. I really like this one. So for those of you that are listening, I want to close your eyes and imagine a place where you feel safe and relaxed. It can be somewhere out in nature. It can be a room in your home. It can be a memory. So concentrate on that scene. Keep your eyes closed and describe it in as much detail as possible. I want you to think, what can you see? What can you hear? What can you smell? What can you feel? What can you taste? Now, open your eyes again. So I would suggest you go through that with the young person. Just take, not quite as quickly as I did it, but just take through it, make them imagine all those things. And often just you feel a palpable sense of calm. And that peaceful scene, like they can be in a classroom getting really upset and they can just kind of zone out a bit and go to that peaceful scene. And immediately that might facilitate them feeling a bit better, feeling a bit calmer, for example. They can even draw that scene. They can, when they go to bed, they close their eyes and go back to visit it. So I'm just going to end by telling you a little bit about the study I did of teaching kind of lots of staff in schools these tools and what they told us. So with over 100 teachers feeding back after 3 months, we asked them, which tools that you were taught did you use? And this kind of shows that the teachers that we spoke to, almost half had used the relaxation and the sleep advice. So it just shows like how many young people need it. And I think it's probably quite a non-stigmatizing, easy way to talk about mental health problems, saying, how's your sleep? Relaxation techniques. It's not really a therapy of talking about their difficulties, but might help them significantly. A lot also found the Treaure box helpful to use. Not that many use, 50% use behavioural change, but it's great that they've tried it. And we asked these teachers 3 months later with how many students have you used it. And so most tried it with 1 to 2, some with 3 to 4, and about 17% had tried it with 5 or more students. And we asked teachers about how they felt about themselves and their teaching. So that's we call self-efficacy after attending training. So we asked 156 teachers who completed the measures at time 1 and compared them to the 32 that completed the full set of measures at 3 months. And what we found was that those at the second time was significantly higher self-efficacy if they use the tools in more than 5 pupils compared to fewer than 5 pupils. So they're actually learning skills, putting them into practice, feeling that they're helping the young people you're working with often makes you just feel better about the work you're doing in general. And this is what some of the school staff, we only spoke to 11 school staff in more detail, but we asked them what they thought. So most felt that the tools were useful, helping school staff to think about what they can do before referring special services. They felt that any one of us can do something about scary mental health problems. You don't just leave it to mental health services. And tools help young people to live in the moment more, calm them down, remind them of support systems, and as a way to talk about feelings and coping strategies. some of the barriers about being worried to dig deeper and to ask questions about trauma. So thank you very much for listening. I'm sorry this has been a whistle-stop tour. I'll put a link to my website on this chat and you can download these slides from there. I hope this is useful to you. If you have any feedback, I would really love to hear it, because this is really work that we want to make useful to staff like yourself. So the more ways I can learn how to do that, the better. Thank you.